Did everyone hear of the Weinstein verdict today? For those of you who didn't, he got 23 years. That's huge because he was, the possibility was between 5 years and 25 years, and the judge gave him 23 years, and that's amazing, amazing. It's a good day. Not for him, but... Okay, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself and how I came to be here and a little bit of my journey. My name is Jessica Barth. I'm an actress, a writer, silence breaker, activist, and director. So I moved out here from Philadelphia when I was 22. And my dream was to be an actress, and part of that dream, a big part of that dream, was due to watching films by Harvey Weinstein. He was an icon. He was an icon for independent film, and I just fell in love with independent film as a teenager, and watching him produce films that were not mainstream. They weren't from studios. They were from people that seemed like just like you and me, who were creative and wrote from their heart. He took their dreams and made them a reality. So I lived in Philadelphia. I chose to come to Los Angeles because I wanted to do film and TV rather than theater in New York. So I started to work out here fairly quickly. I got an agent and I started to build up my resume. And it was 2011. I went to a Golden Globes party and I met Harvey Weinstein. And I didn't know anything about him other than his career. I didn't know any rumors about his behavior or anything like that. So I met him and we started talking about film, and I knew pretty much every film he ever produced, and his company was Miramax at the time when I really got into his projects. So we had a great conversation. We talked about where I came from, how I grew up, my love of acting and film, and he seemed great. And he called me the next day and said, I'd like to meet with you and discuss your career. Can you meet me in the lobby of the Peninsula Hotel? So I was married, and at first, I had an agent, but this was a different level for me. So I was thinking, do people really meet in the lobby of a hotel at night, and just maybe this is how you're supposed to do it? So I started to do research. I saw that he was married. He just had a baby. Okay. I had my husband drive me. My husband dropped me off, and I went to the lobby. He wasn't in the lobby. And then I got a call from him, and he said that he was too famous to come down to the lobby, that I should come up to his suite. And against everything, I'm like, well, I was hesitating. He's like, well, it's really big up here. It's not like a hotel room. There's a living room. It'll be fine. I just don't want anybody to recognize me. So I called my sister and I said, well, Harvey Weinstein's not here, and he wants me to go up to his suite. And so I did. So I went up to his room, and I was dressed really professionally. He was his shirt was untucked. He was very casual, and my sister said, text me as soon as you get up there and let me know how it is. And at first we talked about film, and I texted her. I said, it's great. This is awesome. He's like, I have this film for you in New York, and then it turned not very quickly, but it turned eventually to requesting a naked massage. And I was like, well, that took a different turn. I said, oh, Harvey, I'm married, and you are too, right? And he's like, yeah, but we have an open relationship. And I was like, okay, well, I don't. And then he went back to the films, and he was obviously this wasn't his first time doing this, so he was very smart in how he did everything. And then I could see, like, okay, this was not, I was devastated, getting devastated at that point. I called my mother prior, and she's like, Jesse, I really think this is your big break. This is what you've worked so hard for. And I just started to feel really embarrassed. So I was like, this isn't the meeting that I thought it was going to be. And I got up and started to leave. And he said, this is how things are done in Hollywood, and if you want to ever compete in Hollywood, then you're going to have to lose 10 pounds. If you want to compete with Mila Kunis and Natalie Portman, you're going to have to lose weight. And I was like, you know what, Harvey? That's the last straw. And then we got in like this argument, and I grew up in Philly on the East Coast, so I was able to like hold my ground with him, but I was shaking. And he got very angry, and I was able to get out of the room. So after that, I told a friend, I said, I'm so, like, I was devastated. I left the room, I was crying. The doorman was like, are you okay? And it was just a really humiliating experience. But he never touched me, and I was able to get out. And I went and I told a friend what had happened, and I said, I think I'm going to go to the cops. I think I'm going to tell them what happened. And he was like, well, what are you going to tell them? And I was like, well, he lied. And he's like, oh, he lied. Oh, you're going to tell the cops that he lied. And so I didn't have the knowledge or the education to know that that was even sexual harassment. I didn't know that that was illegal. I didn't know anything. I was very new to the industry. So I just let that go. And in 2015, Ashley Judd wrote she spoke at a conference, and she talked about this movie mogul who showed up in a bathrobe, but she didn't name him. And I reached out to her agent, and I said, I think I know who she's talking about. If she wants any support, then I'm here. I didn't hear back from her. And then in 2017, I found out that Ronan Farrow was writing an article. And I called him, and I told him my story, and gave him my name, and that was the New Yorker article that along with the New York Times article, kind of ignited this movement. But the real passion and that has kept me going so strongly throughout these past 2 years and even prior, it wasn't the fact that I was sexually harassed, it's the fact that I was sexually assaulted, and by a different person. And I was sexually assaulted by someone that I was supposed to trust. I was drugged. I don't remember anything. I just woke up with bruises. But I'm not going to talk about that, but that's why I have such a fire in my belly to be in this space and to create safety. I have 2 daughters and a son. I have 5 nephews and 2 nieces, and it's my goal to create safety for them so that they can pursue their dreams without worrying about whether they're going to be assaulted or some powerful man is going to steal their dreams from them. So it's been a process for these past 2 years. It's very, very difficult. For those of you who may not know about our criminal justice system, it is really, really difficult to even get any of these cases filed. So the fact that Harvey Weinstein is, that charges are being pressed against him in Los Angeles, and the fact that he's been convicted just proves how guilty he actually is, because it's so incredibly difficult. Jackie Lacey's our Los Angeles DA, and she set up a special task force in 2017 to handle the onslaught of Me Too cases. 40 plus cases have crossed her desk, and Harvey Weinstein is the only one that she filed. And she only filed that case on his first day of the New York trial. So there's still cases sitting open on her desk. So that's just to give you a background of how difficult it's so difficult as a victim to come forward at all, and then to come forward to authorities and retell your story to detectives and then DAs, and go through that whole process, or maybe even going to get a rape kit done, and then for a district attorney to say, like, we're not going to press charges is completely devastating. So that's been something that I've been trying to help reform. the other thing that I have created is a nonprofit called Voices in Action. And that spawned from when everything happened with Harvey Weinstein. I set up an email, whoisyourharvey@gmail, and I invited victims to write in and tell their stories and then to name their abuser. And if more than one person named their abuser, I would let them know. And then they could decide what they would like to do. From there, it's grown into an actual nonprofit. And we've received over 275 reports. 8 cases have been filed, investigated, or settled. 85 plus people have received free legal consultation or mentorship, and 14 people that you've probably seen in the news have lost positions of power because of our nonprofit and connecting victims and allowing them to know that they're not alone in their abuse, and then they were able to come together and press charges either on the civil side or the criminal side, or settle cases. So that's been what I've been doing for the past 2 years. I haven't been acting. It's taken me away from that. But my goal for 2020 is to get back to some more joyous things in my life and more creative. So from there, Lou asked me what I wanted to talk about. Lou Godbold, the executive director of ECHO, asked me what I would like to talk about. And I think I'm all about like futuristic stuff now, like what's going to happen in the future, as opposed to like keeping where I've been for the past 2 years, which has been incredibly tumultuous and devastating and up and down, and it's taken a toll on my family. And so I really want to empower people that if you have experienced trauma, and I don't know anybody that hasn't experienced some sort of a trauma, but if you've experienced trauma, how to accept that, learn from it, heal from it, and then succeed in your life, not in spite of it, but because of it, because it is a part of who you are. So we can either allow that pain to keep us back, or we can use it to push us forward. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about, because I feel like that's what I've done with this whole process. And I feel really proud of myself, actually, because it's been really, really difficult. And I know some of you sitting here today may be sitting with pain, maybe dealing with an experience that happened to you. And while I'm not completely through it, I feel like first of all, today was closing a chapter on that part and getting justice for not only myself, because he did retaliate against my career, but all of my sisters out here that you'll be able to see as well, that we've been walking through this journey together. So using your voice really does matter, and it's really a way to take your power back. And if you don't want to use your voice, you don't have to, but for me, it's been very empowering because it's been a very powerless process. So I have a couple things that I do and that I encourage. I mentor victims on I do 10 hours a month mentorship for victims, and what I encourage them to do is to speak it, and that could be to yourself in the mirror. It can be to your best friend. It doesn't have to be publicly. A lot of the times I don't encourage people to come forward publicly. I don't feel like it's the right choice for everybody, but I find that speaking it out loud and saying it to myself, like, okay, this happened, because before I would kind of not admit that it happened, because first of all, I don't remember, and second of all, I just didn't allow my brain to go there, and I felt like eventually I found out that was holding me back from any kind of healing, and I was very depressed for a while after, and I didn't know it was because I wasn't acknowledging it. So speaking it out loud, whether that's, again, to yourself, to the mirror, you can even write it down. That's actually the second step. Writing it down, whether you're into writing or you're not, but just writing anything, just start writing, and you'll be amazed at how getting it out of your body is transformative. Journaling has been my saving grace. And when I'm feeling like really heavy or like icky or why me kind of, when I write it down, that's another way that I feel like, okay, I can take a little bit more control of the situation here. And I often get answers too as I'm writing, like, okay, this is the next step this is the next right step. The third thing I had to do was accept that it happened. And that's part of speaking it out, but like accepting, okay, this is something that I never wanted to happen to me, but it happened to me. Allow yourself the time to kind of grieve the person you were before that trauma happened. And then you have to say, like, where are you going to go from here? But you have to accept it first. You have to allow those feelings, whatever they are. And then you have to make the choice of like, okay, I can't stay in this bubble, right? And I should talk like for me, I shouldn't say you have to. I had to say to myself, I can't stay in this bubble. So what's the next step? And a lot of that comes from, or can come from, or has come from, for me, the support I have from my husband and my children. I have a 16-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And a lot of that was, okay, I have to be present for them. A lot of that was my husband saying, you need to get your ass into therapy. And a lot of that was my mom and my sister. So like having that support and listening, I'm a pretty stubborn person, but listening to the people who love you and who are around you that may see your pain even when you're ignoring it, I think is really important. And then to start that healing process. So what does that healing process look like to you? What it looked like to me was I had to rest because I was at the same time dealing with a criminal justice system. I was I was creating this nonprofit, and it was a lot of work, and it was a lot of one-on-one interaction with victims on a day-to-day basis and reliving my trauma and their trauma. And for that, I had to take some steps back and rest and set boundaries of when I could talk about things and when I couldn't talk about them. Self-care is not something that comes easy for me. I grew up in Philadelphia, not a lot of money. My parents aren't the kind of parents that like you see today or how I am with my children, they're just kind of like deal with it. So self-care doesn't come easy for me. So I had to make it a priority, and whatever that looks like to you. For me, I had to make sure that I was in bed by 10 o'clock. And when I couldn't sleep, I have to take melatonin, which is really wonderful to help sleep. It's a vitamin, and it helps sleep, and it helped calm my mind so I could get rest. Another thing is eating well. I was not eating well. I would rather have wine and potato chips than like green juices and just healthy food. So I've started to meal plan, and I've started to do that on Sundays. It doesn't happen all the time, but on Sundays I like to plan out my week, and I like to plan out what I'm going to eat, and that's helped me. I'd like to say that I do like masks and baths and that. I'm not there yet, but I do recommend having some sort of a routine for self-care, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're certainly not going to be able to take care of anybody else, and you're certainly not going to be healthy walking out into the world. Also, saying no was big for me. There's a lot of events, there's a lot of opportunities for press and even just friends that they're just kind of like, I just had to say no. I had to stay home a lot. That was very imperative for my well-being. And then focusing on, here I am, where am I going next? What's the path forward? And that's kind of what I want to talk to you more about today, is thriving after trauma. And I don't know where you're at. If anybody wants to share in a couple minutes, we can do that. But for a long time, personally, I can tell you that it felt very helpless, that nothing was going to happen in the criminal justice system. I wasn't getting a lot of support for the nonprofit. I was doing a lot of work. I was taking time away from the things that really, really fed my soul, like my children and my husband. And I didn't know how to interact with them in a healthy way. It's been really, really tough. So I finally got to the place where giving to other people, while having self-care, but also giving and helping and being of service to other people, has really helped to get my power back and not feel so powerless. And on the days that I want to give up and the days I don't want to do this work anymore, without, like, always I'll get an email or a letter, and I have them all over my room, like, your work means something, keep going. Just reading your social media is lighting me up. So taking something and taking your pain and helping somebody else is one way to take your power back, and then finding your best course on how to thrive and use what happened to you as a fire it's not hurting your soul, it's igniting your soul. So going through those kinds of steps, and for me that was compartmentalization and priorities. And I made a list. I said, here's my goal, this is what I want to do, and if something is not feeding that goal, then I'm not going to do it. So if I'm asked to speak it somewhere and it's going to take me away from my family, I'm not going to do it. If it's a party and it's going to keep me out late at night, I'm not going to do it. Having the schedule and the meal prep has really, really helped. Movement really helps, and you don't have to get out there and work out if working out is not your thing, but moving, walking, dancing, singing, in the shower, just things you did. As I look at my children, they're always running around, they're always singing, they're always dancing. Getting back to that kind of like childlike magic will get you out of your head and out of this pain, and get it out of your body, which is most important, because a lot of this can make us sick. We can physicalize our trauma and it'll make us sick. So moving and getting that out, physically, and writing it down, learning new things. I'm learning the piano right now. Not great at it, but learning the piano. These are things for me, so I encourage you to make a list of what's going to make you happy, what's going to take you out of your head, and not concentrating so much on, like, for me, I obsessed about it, how to get justice, how to get this victim to come forward. I obsessed about it, and that's all that it was. But moving into that space of joy and creativity. And then nature was really big. I love to hike. But starting with the list of things that give you joy. I have a big list in my office that just says, this is the list of joy. And remembering to do at least one of those things a day. It doesn't always work. Life happens, but like, read a book, sit with yourself for 5 minutes, play with your kid, play with your dog, go outside for a walk, anything to get you out of the space of like obsessing about this trauma. So those are the type of things that I've done. Like I said, it's not foolproof. I'm not entirely there yet. I'm getting there. Today was a big day for so many people. This has been such an incredible journey for so many people. And I want you guys to know that this verdict has absolutely changed the game in sexual violence. The fact that he got such a harsh sentence and they didn't have physical evidence. They went on the evidence of the voices of the victims. This will empower victims to come forward. They'll know that they'll now be believed. And if we have more people reporting, we have more people coming forward, we have more predators being held accountable, that's going to decrease the statistics for sexual violence. So it's a big, big day today for everybody, for our sons and our daughters and everybody that we love. So it is a day to celebrate. And while I don't like the vision of anybody sitting in a prison for the rest of their life, I had to come to, there's consequences in life. And this is big consequence. And he did do these things. He committed these crimes, and that's his punishment. And as much as I don't want to think of anybody rotting in prison for the rest of their life, I do feel like the punishment fit the crime. So it's a big day. I would like to, is there any questions about anything, or anybody want to share anything? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and maybe I didn't articulate that well. I don't mean write exactly what happened to you. I don't know that I ever wrote down in detail what happened to me. I wrote about how I was feeling and the fact that it did happen. I didn't write details about it. I just said this happened to me and how that made me feel and how I was triggered. So getting your emotions really out, and any, especially negative emotions, so that they're not, I'm really big on, I'm a believer in physicalizing your stress and causing dis-ease in your body, dis-ease and disease in your body. So I think that any way that you can get those feelings out, but certainly anything that re-triggers you, no. But just your feelings, yeah. Mm-hmm. And also I would say about like the energy of it, in my opinion, you want to get that energy out of you and onto the paper, or even speaking it, recording it, speaking it to the mirror, anything, get it out of you so you can release that and let it go. Thank you. I'm glad that we were able to help in any way. But yeah, that happens, like we're so in it that we can't see it. But if we have somebody that we trust and we love and they're seeing it, then in my opinion and in my experience, trusting that was really, really beneficial. So I'm happy that you had somebody to support you.
I've had a hard time connecting with other possible survivors, talking with attorneys. And so my question to you would be, how does somebody get involved with Voices of Action? Would I go to your website, or how could somebody get involved?
To connect or to get legal advice, or?
Yeah, just to get all the services that you provide.
So we provide, one is the reporting platform. So I know your abuser is very public, and there's other women that you know of already. So what I would suggest is you make a report, and then if you want free legal consultation, we offer that. We also have a list of support services that are people that I personally have met with over the past 2 years. Every single one on there are people that I've met with and strongly believe in their support. Women in Film Helpline is run by a wonderful person, and they offer immediate assistance, and then they also offer group training. So not group training, group counseling. So if you call them, it's through Safe Space, and they work around your schedule, and you can have like 5 or 6 people in a small group of therapy, and it's low cost, or it's affordable or no cost, depending on your financial situation, and that's through the Right Institute. So I always recommend that, because I feel like group therapy is wonderful, and that's another way to meet other victims that are going through the same thing. And then there is a group of women that you mentioned that
we're not organized. So is that something that Voices of Action could help with?
I personally can help with that because I know a lot of those women. So I'm happy to put you in touch with them.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you. Good.
Situation was more of early childhood, but I find that what you're saying is very applicable, and I'm just intrigued by this saying your story, the emotional story, and saying it to a mirror. That's very appealing, because I find myself flipping back and forth into actual denial and then saying, well, wait a minute, and just to kind of clarify and hear it myself, I think is pretty important. So I found that very intriguing, and I'm sure just ways that I don't even understand yet, everything that you've said can apply to even that kind of situation. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. And kids too. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's Me Too. And then Corey Feldman actually created Kids Too hashtag. And there's a lot of support out there right now for childhood abuse. And this is one of those things that I've had to kind of create a boundary with, because I have children, and if I went into that, I know that I would just dive very deeply into helping that, and I have to have a boundary. But I'm also very passionate about that and intrigued about that. Also, there's a wonderful nonprofit called 1 in 6, because 1 in 6 men have been sexually abused in their life, most of the time as children. But there's a lot of support out there, especially I think with the Catholic Church kind of blew the lid off of childhood abuse, and there's so many victims out there. I've had someone from college reach out to me recently who was a victim of one of the priests in Philadelphia, and I was able to give him a lot of referrals just because this is a really relevant. It always has been, but it's been there. I feel like there's been a little bit of a like stigma around talking about it, and I feel like the conversation is really getting out there now. So I'm happy to forward you any kind of resources or support, because I know of quite a bit. And thank you for sharing. Anybody else? It's okay. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think it's probably the most, because it's the least talk about in my experience. And I am seeing more people. And Jonathan Shack is a friend of mine, and he's an actor. And I won't speak to his experience, but he's very, very passionate about this, very passionate about it, and he's wonderful to talk to. But he has really led in a lot of ways, along with Corey Feldman, who's been talking about sexual abuse for decades. And I think if you look at Corey Feldman's journey, even as a public figure, he's been labeled as crazy and difficult to work with and eccentric and all of these things. And I would imagine that would make you a little bit crazy, like seem crazy, because you don't know how to deal with it. But I can tell you, I've met him, and he's not crazy. He's very passionate about this subject, and he's done a lot of work in it. He's changed laws for kids. I don't know if you guys are aware, but the law has just changed that if you were abused as a child, you have a look-back window to take your abuser to court, and I believe it's 2 years. Again, this isn't like my expertise, but it's the Child Act, or I could find information for you that's more specific. But just based on that they're changing laws and addressing these issues is huge, because it hasn't happened before. There was this statute of limitations for children. It's absurd. And then RAIN is a really great hotline, because and they can direct you, because that they also work with the family unit and the abuse within the family, which is very prevalent. I mean, I feel like that's where it mostly takes place as children, is within the family and people that you know and should trust. And I think breaking that stigma, because you're a child and then you grow up and you're an adult, I can only imagine. I can only imagine, and I'm happy to give you any kind of resources that I know of. And I do know quite a bit just through Jonathan and Corey, and I can direct you towards them as well. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Anybody else? Does anybody have any thoughts on the Me Too movement? That's something that I'm interested to hear, is if you're not within the entertainment industry, or if you are, do you have any thoughts on where it's going, or do you think it's a good thing, or do you think it's blown out of proportion? Do you think it's gone too far, or do you think it's necessary?
First of all, I just want to give props to, it was a black woman who came up with the hashtag Me Too movement. I think that's important to talk about intersectionality when we're talking about survivors and talking about this subject matter. I'm also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And I'm also a yoga teacher. I'm a Kundalini yoga teacher. And in this community, we allegations against the teacher who brought this teachings to the U.S. have come out, and it's kind of like exploded in our community. The teacher's name was Yogi Bhajan, and there's a book came out about a month ago of a woman who worked with him for 20 years. She was one of his secretaries, and she alleges that she was physically and sexually abused by him. He made her have an abortion with his child, and now like hundreds of stories are coming out against this person who's dead now. But it's really like kind of exploded in the community, and I feel like because of the Me Too movement, these stories have been able to come out, and people can have a voice to this stuff. And I think it's really important that we're seeing this in every aspect. I mean, every entertainment, spirituality, education, everywhere we're hearing more and more about these stories because I think of the Me Too movement. So I feel, really thankful as a survivor that these stories are coming forward, as painful as they may be for folks to hear or to even like discover or uncover within themselves. But I think I think only good can come from truth. Truth is powerful, and even if it hurts, I think it's important that once we can actually acknowledge that these things happen, then we can begin to heal. If we don't talk about them, it's nothing. We're not going to be able to heal from them, at least in my opinion. And so, anyway, just want to say that, yeah, I do appreciate that you we're talking about the Me Too movement, because I think it is really important to speak truth to power. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd be interested to connect with you because through Voices in Action, what we're trying to do is create a space within the spiritual, like yoga and meditation for survivors, and offer that at a very low cost, if a cost at all. So I would love to, because I recently went on a retreat where I did a lot of breath work. And that was the first time I did a lot of breath work, and I was able to release, like I was floored about the amount that you hold in your body, and you can just release through breath and movement. So I'm really, really passionate about that and want to bring that to survivors. So I'd love to connect. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think a holistic approach to the abuse of power and sexual harassment and assault is imperative, and I think we're getting there. I think getting women in more positions of power is essential. I think electing women is essential. And this isn't about like women against men. I mean, there's men here, and I so appreciate you guys being here. My husband is a wonderful man, and it's not about women against men. It's about just working together and being equals and equality and equity. That's what it's about. And I think that we'll have a much safer, more beautiful world once that we achieve that. And I think that we're on the path to that. We're trying to through this movement, the women's movement, civil rights. I mean, we're moving forward. We're not there yet, but even within my industry, there's more women directors. There's more opportunity for people of color. There's not enough, but at least these conversations are starting those steps to take place. And you're right about a lot of this happens in the workplace with people in positions of power over you. And that's kind of why one of the reasons I created Voices in Action was because, and it's so important for me to keep it independent and not have it go under the control of another institution, because I think victims have lost confidence in reporting to people of power and institutions. So having it independent, survivor-led, survivor-focused, victim-centric is very important, because for my example, for Harvey Weinstein, who am I going to report that to that's not going to have allegiance to Harvey Weinstein? Same if you are working in any industry. Going to human resources is going to get back to your boss. So to have an independent reporting platform and resources, I think, is imperative to change. And that's what I'm working on. And I see people here who are also working in that with Time's Up and the Hollywood Commission and within the entertainment industry and beyond. I'm focused on the entertainment industry because that's where my resources lie right now. But my goal is to create this for every industry. That's awesome. And that's so great to hear, because speaking out, Tarana Burke has been doing this work for decades. But the viral Me Too era happened in 2017. And through those articles, and I had a choice whether or not to give my name. And well, I'm not a household name or anything. I mean, I was in two pretty big movies, and my career had already been retaliated against, and it was a big decision whether or not to put my name against someone like Harvey Weinstein, because he was still Harvey Weinstein. So, but that was part of my, talking to my husband, should I give my name? Should I not give my name? And I just came to the conclusion that it would be much more powerful to give my name, because if I didn't, and not saying anything to the people that didn't, but for me, my hope was that it gave other victims that courage. So I'm glad to hear that happened, even for one person. I've seen your work with that community, and I remember thinking, like, that's a community that you wouldn't even think that, but then it's like so obvious that that would be able to be held as such a secretive and maybe even like in such a shameful way because of your religion. So thank you for that. I think that's really important, beautiful work. Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else? Can I ask what industries you guys work in? Does anybody want to tell? You guys? Healthcare? Well, thank you for that. Thank you for working in healthcare. Yeah, let's not talk about coronavirus. This might be my last outing for a long time. But healthcare is there a Time's Up healthcare? Yeah, there's a Time's Up healthcare affiliate? It's like Time's Up, and then as an umbrella, and then they have Time's Up. I can't talk about. I don't know, but but healthcare is one of them. So, do you work in a hospital? That's great. That's wonderful. I feel like just steps like that, like you were talking about in the workplace. I think this movement in this era is awakening people to the issues, and people are actually taking steps that will make a difference. But we have a couple minutes left. Does anybody have anything else to say? Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know of somebody, similar circumstances, went to Florida from Venezuela. And, Venezuela is on the cusp of crashing, really, like collapsing. So the economy over there is pretty much non-existent. So a couple women came over here, a mother and her children, teenagers came over to Florida and started to work in a hotel. And I don't know the name of the hotel, but started to work in the hotel industry, and they were just working them for like $2 an hour. And that's not even talking about the sexual aspect of that or the harassment. So it's a very it's something that needs to be addressed and exposed. So yeah, the Legal Defense Fund is wonderful. And also, I don't know if this woman, how many women are coming forward, but what Voices in Action could do is connect them through attorneys, and the attorneys are trauma informed, and that part is free. But then they would have to apply for the case. If they went forward, they'd have to apply to a Legal Defense Fund. But if there's a community of victims, we're more than happy to help at Voices in Action as well. Okay, I just want to say thank you so much for being here for almost an hour, listening to me talk, and Thank you for sharing your stories. I mean, they really do light up my soul, because it takes such courage, and I feel like the more we talk about it, the more we can address it, the more we can heal, and the more we can make sure that we create a society that this no longer happens. So, thank you very much.